Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into one of the most game-changing ideas in development economics, W. Arthur Lewis's dual sector model. It's all about one big question. How does a poor country kickstart its own growth engine and transform itself? So, picture a typical pre-industrial country. According to Lewis, they're probably saving and investing about 5% of their national income. I mean, that's barely enough to just keep the lights on, let alone actually build something new. And this is the magic number, 15%. That's the rate you need to hit to really fuel rapid capital growth. You know, the stuff industrial revolutions are made of. That is a massive leap. Now, Lewis argued that the answer wasn't just, telling people to save more money. His idea was way more radical. It was about completely restructuring the entire economy from the ground up. Okay, let's really get into this. All right, so first things first, we need to understand the world Lewis is describing. He called it a dual economy, and it's basically two completely different economic worlds living right next to each other in the same country. On one hand, you've got the traditional subsistence sector. Think small farms, not a lot of machinery, where the output per person is pretty low. And on the other hand, you have the modern capitalist sector. This is all about using capital, factories, machines, to make things efficiently, and most importantly, to generate a profit. So what makes this whole thing go? Well, the engine of this model runs on a very specific kind of fuel, something Lewis called an unlimited supply of labor. But where does all this labor actually come from? And this right here, this is the absolute key to the whole theory. It means that as new factories and businesses pop up, they can hire and hire and hire as many people as they need, all without having to raise wages. Why? Because there's this huge pool of people just waiting for jobs. Lewis saw this giant labor pool hiding in plain sight in the subsistence sector. It's full of people who are working, sure, but their productivity is super low, maybe even zero. The classic example is the family farm with too many kids. If one of them leaves to go work in a factory, the farm still produces the exact same amount of food because there were too many hands to begin with. That person is essentially surplus labor. Okay, so you have this ocean of cheap labor. How in the world does that create money for new investment? Well, this is where the magic happens. This is the spark that starts the engine. Now, this graph might look a little intense, but the idea behind it is actually super simple. Capitalists pay workers a low subsistence wage, just enough to live on. But because those same workers are now using machines and are way more productive, the value of what they produce is much, much higher than what they're paid. That huge gap between the two, Lewis called that the capitalist surplus, and it's pure profit. And that surplus, that's the key to everything. That money isn't just spent on fancy cars, it's plowed right back into the business. It's the fuel that makes the engine bigger and stronger, creating this incredibly powerful cycle. And here you can see that virtuous cycle in action. You take the profits, you buy more machines, you build bigger factories. That new capital allows you to hire even more cheap labor from the countryside. And those new workers, they generate an even bigger surplus, which of course gets reinvested again. It's like a snowball rolling downhill, getting bigger and bigger and faster and faster. So as that capitalist sector gets more and more efficient, maybe with new technology or inventions, the main result isn't better pay for the workers. Not yet, anyway. Remember that labor supply is still unlimited. Instead, almost all of that extra value goes straight into that growing pile of profits ready to be reinvested. And this whole process, this cycle of profit and reinvestment, it fundamentally transforms the entire economy. It solves that puzzle we started with. How do you get from a measly 5% savings rate all the way up to 15%? So let's be super clear here. The country's savings rate isn't going up because poor people are suddenly pinching pennies. No way. It's going up because the slice of the entire national pie that goes to profits, and capitalists are the ones who save and invest, that slice gets much, much bigger. And Lewis himself put it perfectly. He argued the real problem isn't poverty itself, it's that the profit-making part of the economy is just too small. The secret, then, is to grow that capitalist sector, and the fuel for that growth is the surplus you get from all that cheap labor. But, this process can't just go on forever, right? I mean, eventually, that unlimited supply of labor has to run out. And when it does, the whole game changes. And this is what's called the Lewisian turning point. The process stops when that reserve army of labor is finally used up. All those surplus workers from the countryside now have jobs in the city. And for the first time, factories can't just grab more people for the same low wage. They actually have to compete for workers, which means wages finally start to rise for everybody. The transformation is complete.
So that's the model, but Lewis came up with this back in the 50s. The huge question is, does it still hold up? Well, it's been used to explain the incredible growth of places like China, which many say hit its own Lewisian turning point just in the last decade or so. But whether the model still fits in today's globalized world is for sure a hot topic of debate for economists.